Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk podcast. My name is Dimitri. This is my co-host Akim. And today we have a very special guest, the money coach from Dubai, Anthony Walsh. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
So, Anthony, you're a financial advisor. And the first question I have is, does everyone need a financial advisor, regardless of the level of income they have?
That's a very good question. I would say yes, but the level of service will differ. And I'll give you an example, right? I'm a financial advisor. Money is my passion. I grew up in this field, and I've been doing this for a while. I got a diploma in financial advice. I went to university. I passed the exam. I published a book. I listened to 5 hours of financial education per week. I've read over 100 books on the topic. And even myself, I still benefit from financial advice from an external party. And the reason for that is what may seem obvious to others will seem sometimes completely invisible to you. So having a financial advisor can always help you. It doesn't mean that everyone needs a fully fledged financial advisor, but everybody needs a second opinion, even myself. So when I work with a financial advisor, they were actually able to pinpoint an issue in my financial plan because they realized that there was no, for example, there was no disability insurance in there. And they said, well, do you need disability insurance? I said, probably not. And they said, well, what's your plan? I said, well, going to sound bad, but my plan just move back to Europe in this case and benefit from the free disability system and cover and medical coverage. And then he raised a very good point, which was, okay, what about your wife? And I'm like, oh, she'll move back with me. And he asked me a very tough question. He said, well, do you think it's fair for your wife to then leave her life and her business and move back to France just so you can get some free healthcare when the disability insurance is just $17 a month? Is it fair? Is it a fair trade-off? And this is something I never considered, but it's only when you have an external perspective that you're able to put that in there as well. So this is an example of how someone like me, who's, I would say, quite advanced in that field, can still benefit from a financial advisor. And most people will definitely get more value out of it as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So the follow-up to that, and then I'm going to let Akim join. What does a financial advisor actually do? So I come to you, I have some money, I made some money, I worked, or maybe I'm working through my financial journey, and I want to secure my future for me and my family. Then I come to you. Please walk me through how the whole thing works.
Good question. So this I think where most people get it wrong. Most people focus on the investment management part, but a good financial advisor, one who's doing it correctly, will go a lot deeper than that. First, we're going to go, it's divided in 3 steps. The first is we're going to go into financial planning, which is identifying who you are, what your goals are, and then how much these goals are going to cost. So we sort of figure out your financial independence number. Once we have that, and only once we have that, then we can start looking at investment management, which are the best investments to get you to that point? How much money do you need to invest and for how long, right? Step number 3 is then personal finance and behavioral coaching, which is, okay, we know what your number is. We know how much you need to invest every month. We know which funds you need to invest in. Now let's figure out how the hell you can reach that number. How can you save that much money in the first place? Because not everybody can do that, right? Without savings, you can't invest. So a good financial advisor, in theory, should be able to take you from step 1 to step 3. It's not just investment management.
Again?
If I may, because you mentioned, that you can just move to France and have some free healthcare. Does it mean that someone who lives in France, for example, does not need a financial advisor? Or someone that lives in Europe, in the European Union, in a country where, in any country in the European Union where retirement is essentially guaranteed, who really needs a financial advisor? And is it only to plan retirement?
Good question. It can be for anything and everyone. So if you're happy with sort of going through your life, living weekend to weekend, never taking 6 months off or a year off to follow your passion, or retiring early. If you're happy to retire at the state pension age of 67 and retire on 40% of your income and live weekend to weekend, then no, you can just continue on with your life and you don't need anything else. But if you do want to retire in your 40s or 50s or 30s, if you do want to have some time to focus on your family, if you don't want to be stuck in work meetings until 6 p.m. on a Friday and want to enjoy your life, and you need some sort of income to replace your salary, then you should have a financial advisor. But you're absolutely right. It's going to depend from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Different countries have different needs. For example, in Europe, you have guaranteed retirement, you've got free healthcare, you've got most of the time disability insurance. So you don't have the same level of service needed, but sometimes it's also more necessary to have it because you're going to have different caveats on how you can actually optimize your investments according to your national tax exemptions, for example.
To jump on that, actually, you mentioned a bit of psychology, right? I mean, since the beginning, you mentioned several psychological aspects. Planning is psychological, the ability to plan ahead, right? Not just live weekend to weekend. So there is some aspect here in psychology. You mentioned also that you do some behavioral coaching, right? The thing is, I meet really a lot of people. I think it's more for this current generation. I mean, the young people currently, they say, I'm not even sure I'm going to live past my 40s or 50s. I'm not even sure that I'm going to still be alive in 10 years. And I want to enjoy my life today, and whatever comes later, comes later. I assume those are the real enemies of the financial advisor. And when you meet this kind of people, or for example, there's a couple that comes to you. One is conscious about the future and wants really like to be sure that, you know, the future is in good hands. But then the partner is like, I'm not sure I'm going to be alive when I'm 50 or 60. What is the goal for me to sacrifice a bit of my present or a lot of my present to guarantee some kind of future that, I don't know, I might die in a car accident next week. What do you usually answer to those people? Because I mean, they're not wrong, right? You can die at any moment. So what is really the point of having a financial plan that sends you in 2050 or 2060? You don't even know if the world is going to be around. We hear so much about climate change and wars and nuclear risk, etc. Are we going to be? A lot of people say we might not be even around. So what do you usually answer to those people?
I love this question. I think it's you really hit the nail on the head here, and I think it's up to us as financial educators to try to spread the word. I think it's an issue of mindset. So when you hear you only live once, you can either look at it and say, "Oh, I only live once, so I need to spend all my money now," or you can be like, "Well, I only live once, so I only got one shot at this. I can only retire at 40 once and enjoy my life. So I'm going to do everything I can to sort of maximize my enjoyment and my fun while I can." If you're living weekend to weekend, chances are you're never going to accumulate enough savings to take a year off and go live in Costa Rica for a while and learn how to surf and meditate. You won't be able to do that because you're living weekend to weekend, right? So what you have to do is you have to find out what your goals are, and then you sort of make a bucket list of all of your goals, and then you categorize these goals per decade. And what you'll find is, some people said, well, I want to move to Turkey or go to Turkey and sit on an all-inclusive resort. Very nice. Do you have to do that in your 30s, or can you do that when you're 65? And then you can sort of prioritize. It makes more sense to do it when you're old. But if you want to climb a volcano and go skydiving, probably better to do it when you're young, you don't have the heart issues, right? So then you sort of write down your goals and you try to plan as to when is the best time that makes the most sense for you to do it. Is it better to do it when you're young or when you're older? And then so you can sort of realign your life like this. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. So when you're a financial advisor, then you give financial advice. You also give psychological advice, right? As we just discussed. Are there any other types of advices you give? For example, tax advice, legal advice, or perhaps relationship advice, inheritance, right? Do you touch to all kinds of these kinds of topics? Family advice? Yes.
So that will depend on financial advisor to financial advisor. Some people focus on a specific area, others are more generalist. Some will also include, for example, how to draft your will in the best possible way. Some will be able to set up for you a trust fund for you and your kids somewhere else. So there are many different specialties that you have to work for, and unfortunately, you cannot be an expert in every single topic everywhere around the world. You can't be a jack of all jurisdictions. You have to eventually pick a place and be an expert in one specific area. And you know what? Sometimes if you have to niche down, that's okay, right? If I'm a financial coach, I'm a financial advisor. I help people get better with their money. And my philosophy is financial freedom as soon as possible so you can start enjoying your life. If somebody comes to me and is like, Anthony, I want to work 90 hours a week nonstop for 40 years. I want to climb the corporate ladder. I want to be a CEO. That's not my ideal client. It's not somebody who would resonate with my belief. So it's probably best that they don't work with me and they instead work with someone, a financial advisor who specializes in that area, because they can give them some other advice. There are also some financial coaches, who help people who only help people who are divorced because they know what they've gone through and they can help them. So it's really going to depend on your own personal situation and whichever financial advisor you find. But if you don't get a good feeling from your financial advisor, don't work with that person. Find another one. There's plenty of good ones out there.
And your personal focus, and then I'll let you, Dimitri, ask your question. But your personal focus, it's people who want to retire early. I mean, this is my understanding, right?
And expats.
And expats who want to save for their retirement when they are in a jurisdiction where they wouldn't receive one, right?
So
Or is that already too specific?
So that can be, but it really depends from country to country. So I focus mostly on expats in Dubai. And the reason for that is because contrary to most places in Europe, it would be very difficult for you to get a state pension of Dubai, even if you work there for a few years. So what can happen is you can work your entire life in Dubai and make very good money, but then not have a guaranteed pension at the end of the day. So you do need to save, you do need to invest, otherwise you don't get anything. It's the same thing. School is not free in the UAE, in Dubai. You have to pay for school fees. And if you haven't budgeted for that, it doesn't make sense. You won't be able to live there, right? So sometimes it makes more sense to move abroad, raise your kids, and come back to Dubai when you earn the big bucks and make the tax-free salary. So it's always a case-by-case assessment. But I specialize mostly in expats in Dubai, because my dad was an expat, my grandfather was an expat. I've seen the financial struggles that they have had, and I want to prevent that from happening to other people as well.
Do you also help with real estate planning, real estate investing in the Emirates? I'm asking because I have really a lot of contacts here in Luxembourg in the financial industry, and friends that are very close to me, and they are interested to move actually to the Emirates, and they want to, before moving, to buy a property there, to have some kind of foot there, probably rent it out, and then move there later. So to this type of people, does it make sense for them to already consult with you?
It depends. So most financial advisors will not be able to provide financial advice relating to an apartment. And the reason for that is because there's too much legal risk, right? Because they don't know the apartment, they don't know the floor, they don't know the neighbors, they haven't done the full check, they don't know the building, they don't know the developer, they don't know the area. There's just too many uncertainties that you don't want to be putting, official financial advice on that. There's just too much risk. So what they can give you is an opinion, guidance, but it's not an official advice per se. But they can certainly help you out with the financial planning as to does it make sense to buy an apartment or not. But I don't think they can recommend, or as far as I know, a specific apartment for you to buy, because there's just too much risk involved in that area. But I see your point. Dubai is an exceptional place to live. There's a lot of people moving there. Real estate is also extremely cheap. So a lot of people are moving there. And there's also very good money to be made in the Dubai real estate market. Because it's such a transitory place, people go there for a few years, make a lot of money, then have kids and move back home. So because it's transitory, people are coming and going all the time. People don't really want to buy, they prefer to rent. And that means that the rental yields are very high. It's also very friendly towards landlord, because if your tenant is not paying, you call the cops and they're out. There's no problem there. It's very investor friendly as well. And it's also tax-free. So it's a great little place to invest. And most of the time, the Dubai real estate market is not really linked to the rest of the world's economy. So while the world's economy can be going down, as we've seen in 2022, rents in Dubai can continue to go up. So that also gives you another hedge as well to consider.
So most
That's
of your
interesting.
clients, and I'm guessing here, are people that lacking some self-awareness when it comes to finances. And they want someone like you to be like their dad and tell them, maybe you shouldn't buy that beach house right now. Maybe you can buy it in 5 years. Let's stick to the plan. And I'm going to get you that beach house, but let's stick to the plan. So how often do you have to tell them no, or maybe it's not a good idea? Because often people, and this is probably the rule and not the exception, most people that have money, they know how to make money. They don't know how to manage their money. They might have like a really good job, an executive, but they don't know how to budget. They don't know how to balance their budget month to month. And they end up coming to you, and you have the mean guy in the story telling them, yeah, 1 month of a vacation in the summer, maybe it's not a good idea if you want to make this whole thing work.
This is probably the toughest part, actually, of your
Yes.
job, Anthony, and of a financial advisor, is people come with their dreams for advice so that you make their dreams happen. This is really the reason they hire a financial advisor. They want someone that they can go to and make all their dreams happen at the same time. And what they will face is someone who's going to kind of destroy or postpone or make all their dreams a little bit smaller. So I assume this requires also a lot of diplomacy and diplomatic skills here.
So let me put it this way. There is this golden rule of personal finance, which is you can afford anything you want, but not everything. You must choose, you must prioritize, you must have a trade-off. So I never tell them what to do. I just ask them a question and let them make their own decisions. So recently I was talking to somebody and they said they really wanted to pay off their mortgage. They don't like debt. It makes them feel insecure. And I told them, would you rather pay off your mortgage or retire 7 years earlier? And in this case, they chose the retirement option. So they always knew what they wanted. They just have to prioritize what you want. You can't have everything you want, but you can talk to a financial advisor and they will act as a good sounding board. And in theory, hopefully a financial advisor should be wearing many hats. They should also be doing some elements of life coaching, but also some element of behavioral therapy to help you figure out what is it that you really want. It's ultimately, I never tell them what to do. I just ask them questions to guide them on the way, but it's always their decision at the end of the day.
So what do you think the problem is, and people can't get themselves together to manage their own affairs? Because when I started working and I was in New York and I was making a decent amount of money, but I did the numbers. I'm like, okay, this is not looking too good. I'm gonna be working every week, every month for the rest of my life. I don't want this. So let me look what I'm gonna do. And I managed to start investing and created some money for myself. And I'm still working for my goals. It's not like I'm done and I'm retiring, and most people never get to that. Is it education? Is it the schooling system? Isn't made up for this subject? And they just, what is it?
There
I
could
think it's
be this perhaps an impact of the social media as well. That
Yeah.
people go on Instagram and they see other people spending a fortune on, I don't know, the best hotels, the best whatever, the best vacation, the best jewelry or bags or luxury items, and they just want to have it all as well. Even though on social media it's often a different person on a good vacation, a different person that just bought an amazing bag, right?
Absolutely. I think the answer is always here, unfortunately, is it depends. But there is one of my favorite quotes when it comes to money management comes from Morgan Housel. And he said that savings is the gap between your income and your ego. So you can grow your income as much as you want, But if your ego grows accordingly and you upgrade your house, you upgrade your car, you upgrade the type of apartment of restaurants you go to, you're still going to be struggling to save. And I see this in Dubai all the time. People are making $10,000 a month, which is a decent amount of money, but in Dubai, many people are making this. They're making $10,000 a month, they still can't save. Now, to people living in Europe, this sounds absolutely crazy, right? Because the median wage in France would be 2,000 euros, for example, right? So making $10,000 seems incredible. And by the way, Dubai can be cheaper than France if you do it right. But people are still not able to save because it's really easy to upgrade the type of building you live in, to upgrade to a fancy apartment, to buy a nicer car, to go on a nicer vacation. It really compounds, and before you know it, your lifestyle really creeps up on you. So ultimately, I think it will depend on your goals, but that's why I think the first part of financial advice, which is the financial planning, is so important, because if you don't have a goal, saving money is going to feel very difficult. You're going to be asking yourself, why am I doing this? It's going to feel like punishment. Whereas once you have a goal, saving money will actually feel like you're liberating yourself from all your burdens to help you reach that goal.
Look, talking about this, a lot of people would spend without hesitation $2,000 on a good vacation, right? So they have good memory and they burn that cash, and next year they're not going to have that cash, but at least they'll have that memory. I'm not sure what your costs are and what a financial advisor costs, but you'll let us know now. But what would convince a person to spend that money for a financial advisor instead of spending that money on a vacation, or actually saving that money for something important like retirement, or for healthcare? What is the advantage of so we already went through the advantages of a financial advisor, but a lot of people think having a financial advisor is really expensive and it's going to drain a lot of your money and a lot of your savings.
So this is where it gets tricky. I think you have to be very careful when you select a financial advisor, because unfortunately, most people who claim to be financial advisors are not. They're salesmen. And this is everywhere, even your banker, right? So even if you just walk down the street, you walk into your bank, you want to talk to the banker, chances are he's not an advisor, he's a salesman. And the way that you can identify this is if the banker is only selling you product from the bank, he's not independent. He's not an advisor. He's a salesman. And of course, he's trying to make money. He's trying to make a commission. So he's, of course, going to sell you the product that will give him the highest commission. That's why people don't like to work with financial advisors, because they don't know if they have their best interest at heart or if the guy's just trying to make extra money. And these people, unfortunately, give a really bad name to the industry because a lot of people are being missold and they get horrible products. So ideally, you'd want to find an advisor who's independent, who can offer you anything that's possible, and who's not getting remunerated on a commission. Because a lot of the times they will tell you device is free, but it's not free because there are some retro commissions in there. Entry fees and exit fees, which is basically just a cash payment for the advisor or the salesman. So you want to find someone who isn't getting paid a commission, who is independent and who can help you. Different advisors are going to have different ways to charge. Some people charge a fee, which is going to be a percentage of your assets under management. So it's usually typically about 1%. People are going to ask, well, is this worth it? And the question is, well, it depends on the advisor, because 1% is pretty good if the advisor is putting you into a low-cost fund. Because if the alternative is you go to your bank and you're paying 2% just for the investment management and not for the advice, you're overpaying massively, because the advisor can give you a better deal than that. So I think it really depends on person to person. Some people don't want to pay the 1% fee. They prefer to pay advisor anywhere between $2,000 to $10,000 for a financial plan, depending on the complexity, depending on the advisor and their fees. But it will really depend. Ultimately, as you know yourself, people buy with emotion and justify with logic, right? So when you buy a $1,200 iPhone, you're not buying it for the iPhone. You're buying it for the status it gives you. Because unfortunately, in some social circles, if you don't have an iPhone, people think you're weird. And we're all human, so eventually we try we end up buying the iPhone. But we don't buy the iPhone because it's a phone. We buy it for the status it gives us. It's the same thing with financial planning and investment management. You pay for the financial advisor to guarantee a good outcome, to guarantee that you will get to where you want to be. and to also give you the peace of mind and the lack of anxiety that everything is going to be okay. That's what you pay for.
Is it a luxury to have a financial advisor? Is it a luxury like my guy, like you say, my guy is putting me in that portfolio, and some people they see it maybe as a status symbol as well. You know, you're too busy getting together your money, and you need someone to do it for you. The same way someone would do, you know, your laundry or stuff. It's not the same thing, of course, but is it like a status symbol as well, beyond the benefits that a financial advisor will provide to an individual or a family? Is it considered to be a status symbol as well?
It's a great question. Some advisors will indeed try to prey on that. They said that they're only work with ultra high net worth individuals. You'll talk to them, they'll make you feel like the most important person in the world. They're going to be sort of luxury advice, it's going to be quite expensive. And other people are going to try to make it as accessible as possible. Unfortunately, you always have to pay. And many financial advisors will not take you if you don't have at least $100,000, just because it doesn't make sense, or they will charge you $3,000 upfront or $5,000 upfront, which for many people, you need to have the cash for it. So in that sense, yes, it is a luxury, but at the same time, it's also a luxury you can't really afford, because having a financial advisor is also an insurance policy, right? I mean, as we know, right, Rome wasn't built in a day. That's something that's good to bear in mind when you're accumulating money. But once you're investing your money and trying to do some shady stuff, you also have to remember that Hiroshima was destroyed in one day. Right? And when you have a financial advisor, they're going to be a sounding board. They're going to prevent you from making that mistake.
Yeah. And one more thing, because you said earlier that most people you see as salesmen or saleswomen, and that's true, because I was personally in a couple of meetings with one of the big firms in New York, and you walk into an office, a nice office, and the person talking to you has no idea how to put together a portfolio or anything, but they can talk to you into buying snow or sand in Dubai, okay? They are smooth talkers, and they are likable, and they can close the sales, and then they're gonna give it to the guy in the back room that is gonna put together the plan and the portfolio and all that. So what you said that most people are salespeople it is correct. You have to you like to talk with the decision maker, the guy who's gonna put the plan together for you, correct? You don't want to.
I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people feel more comfortable to go to a financial advisor who's going to make the decision for them. A financial advisor that tells them, "Don't worry, I'm going to make all your dreams come true," and basically takes their money and invests it for them, and then they get a very hefty invoice, and then you don't hear anymore from that financial advisor after you paid those
The problem.
fees.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when you can tell it's just a salesman. They don't give you the service. They just sell you the product, get their commission, and they're out of here. Kind of like your real estate agent.
Yes.
Right? And ideally, you want somebody who's invested in your personal life, who's got skin in the game, and who only gets paid when you get paid.
Okay, one more question I have, and I would like to take your take on this. I found, because me and Akim, we both manage money for other people on eToro, and some of those people I know personally, and you know, there are different levels of wealth, and I found that the people with the money, that have the money, and they can spend the money, or they can invest the money, the people with a lot of money, they come and the meeting is like 2 minutes. Like, yeah, okay, done. I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm busy. The guy who's gonna invest with you $500, he's asking like 1,000,000 questions. He has to think it over and over and over and over again. So is it that the case in this financial advisory as well? The people with a lot of money come and say, you know what, Anthony, go ahead. It's done. Okay, don't bother me. Just do what you gotta do. But the guy who is barely there probably can barely afford the whole thing. It's gonna grill you. It's gonna ask you 20 questions and 20 emails and 10 follow-ups before he says okay. Is that the case?
Hard to say. In my experience, yes, but I think it really depends. And the reason is not because they don't trust a financial advisor, it's because they've got some blockage within themselves as to why they think investing would not be working, right? They probably have a friend or a family member who invested with a financial advisor. They got burned, so now they want to make sure they're doing it correctly, or they're not convinced about the stock market. This is a very common European thing where people severely distrust the stock market. Whereas if you talk to someone in America who'll be like, of course, the stock market is the best option. Here you go. So I think you also have to work through the old, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Taking another case, Demetris. So you mentioned, so as you mentioned, we manage money for a lot of people on eToro. And to be honest, my most complicated customer, but really it's my only headache, and I have that headache since years now. It's my mother. My mother expects that from the stock market you're gonna get rich, you know. So she gave me part of her savings 3 years ago. So she's retired now. She gave me part of her savings 3 years ago, and she said, Akim, invest. And she expected that she would become rich by investing in the stock market, because not a lot of people, but you have a lot of examples throughout the history of the stock market of someone putting a certain amount of money on one stock and then made millions later on. But this is not even 1% of the population, right? So how do you manage expectations of people, and how do you explain them that, look, I cannot control the exact amount of return you're going to have. I can just make sure to make optimal decisions, to not lose the money that you invested, and to outpace inflation, right? To make sure the return outpaces inflation. So can you help me here to give the right arguments to my mother, basically, and to manage her expectations? She might be listening to
Good
this one.
question, a difficult question. It's a very difficult question. I think it has a lot to do with the guidance that you give, right? So you have to educate the client as to how the stock market works, that it's not always consistent, that there's going to be a mismatch between the company's valuation and the earnings. And that's why the market fluctuates so much. But fluctuation is good, because if there wasn't fluctuation, everybody would just buy, and then the opportunity for gains would decrease significantly. So volatility is your friend. We don't know when it's going to go up, but we do have some data, right? So we know that historically, if you invested in the US S&P 500, which is their flagship stock market index, and you waited 4 years, but you invested at any point since 1926, any single random day, the probability that you would be in the money within 4 years is about 91%. You get a 91% probability of making money. Now, that's really good. When it comes to historical performance of the S&P 500 over the last 100 years, was 8.24%. And that would be if you invested right before the Great Depression. You would see your portfolio going down 90%. It will be depressed for many years. People would be, this Great Depression, people were starving. It was really bad. And it would go back up. And still over that time, you're looking at 8.2% per year on average, over a 30-year period. If you invested at the best possible time and really, really got lucky, then the best return you could have made over a 30-year period, year on year, would have been 14%. So we know that the range of stock market returns is going to be somewhere between 8% to 14%. That's what you're going to get historically. To expect more or less is just not investing according to the evidence. So people who expect to have massive outsized returns say, well, it's not going to happen. And if it does happen this year, there's probably going to be a lot of market pullback the year after. But of course, you can always get lucky. You can invest in the right stock. You can invest in NVIDIA at the right time, and Tesla at the right time, and quadruple your portfolio. But unfortunately, it's not a repeatable strategy. And the problem with that is that investments is not a 1 year or 10-year project.
Yes.
It's an investment to the grave, because you need your investments up until the day you die, because this is where you're going to get your passive income from.
I took this. Thanks, Anthony. That really answers a lot. I took
So you
this
need to find a
example
strategy
of.
that not just for the next.
Sorry, I think we lost here a bit the synchronization. So let's just take a short break, and then we continue. It's Anthony. Just so I'll just put the paper just so remember where to cut. Anthony, thanks a lot. That really answers the question. I gave this example actually of my mother, but I had a more general question in mind. What happens when things don't go according to plan? As I mentioned, some people have expectations and they expect certain things to happen from a plan that they made with their financial advisor. What happens when things don't go to plan? Because not everything always goes according to plan. There could be, as you mentioned, there was a Great Depression, there was the Great Financial Crisis in 2008. There's regularly things that shake the markets and can shake investments, not only in the stock market, but also in real estate, in different geographies. How do these people usually accuse you or accuse their financial advisors that those financial advisors made the mistakes, or are they usually understanding and they come back to you for a second plan? And do you usually have a plan B when you make a plan A for those people, for your customers? Do you usually also have a plan B, or do you make them aware that it's possible that things may not necessarily go according to plan because something happens? Maybe the death of someone in the family, and it shakes the entire financial plan where both partners had to contribute for that financial plan. So what do you usually do when things don't go according to plan?
Great question. So there's a lot of misconception around this topic. Many people will believe that a financial advisor can be on the hook if your investments don't perform. And sometimes they tell you, and they tell me, oh, don't worry, I won't sue you if it doesn't go according to plan. Ha ha ha. But the truth is, if you look at the regulation, you cannot sue a financial advisor if the market doesn't perform. That's not within the law. You just cannot do that, right? Because the advisor doesn't control how much money you make. But they can sue you on, and what does happen is they can say, you put me in an investment which was a scam, you put me in an investment which had too many fees, or you gave me an investment which wasn't appropriate to my risk profile, to my life, and to my goals, right? That's what they can contest you upon. But they can't actually contest the investment returns, and that's always going to go, that's always going to differ. And as you know, you don't measure investment performance in days or months, you measure it in decades, right? Because what may be a good investment strategy today will not work in 10 years. So you have to measure investment performance over decades. That's why we have stock market returns that date back over 100 years. And that's also why we can identify the right asset class which will perform well, right? Because if you look at recent times, you might say, well, bonds may have performed very well, but if you zoom out and you see actually over the long term, bonds are a horrible investment to hold because they barely beat inflation. Most of the time, they don't beat inflation after taxes, right? So you really have to zoom out and measure investment a shorter time period. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of your question. Would you mind repeating it?
So I think you already pretty much answered the question. It was exactly that. It was what happens when things don't go according to plan. And the second part was, do you usually elaborate on a plan B when plan A fails?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So when you provide a financial plan, you cannot give an exact date. So I can't say, well, based on your savings rate, based on the market, you're going to retire on October 17th, 2052 at 10 a.m. It's not how it works. Unfortunately, we have to give them a date range and say, well, you're going to reach your number somewhere within these 6 years. I don't know when. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. Maybe you'll reach it very early. Maybe you'll reach it very late. And in that sense, the stock market can be very unfair because you can be investing at the right time and be perfect, and you can be investing at the wrong time and unfortunately have to retire a few years later or go back to work just because of sequence of return risk, just because of the sequencing of events that happen at the wrong time. This can be very unfair, but that's unfortunately the way it works. So the only thing that we can do as educators is to give them a timeline as to when that's going to happen. It's a little bit like when you try to, it's on when you use Google Maps there. If there's traffic, if there's rain, timeline is going to be affected accordingly sometimes on the way down. But sometimes if you drive well, if you drive fast, you can beat the Google Maps estimates as well. So we just provide the estimates, but we cannot guarantee the outcome. But we can guarantee that you get there. It might just take longer than expected.
Where does crypto fit into all this? Because lately I've been reading that financial advisors, they are ready to start including crypto since with the Bitcoin ETF, start including into people's portfolios. What is your take on that? Do you like it? Maybe it's too risky for your style?
It's a very difficult question. So if there's a demand for it, the financial industry will make a product for it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why we have Bitcoin ETF. So that's the problem. So they're going to be selling you a Bitcoin ETF because it's easy to sell, right? So is that good for you? Difficult to say because there's pros and cons. The cons is that we don't know what the expected returns of Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency is going to be because any cryptocurrency can be replaced. We can replace Bitcoin tomorrow with a different coin, right? And have the exact same system in place. And we don't know what the expected returns are going to be. So for example, if I put all of your money into the S&P 500, I can tell you when you're going to retire within 6 years, for example. If I put all of your money in crypto, I have no idea. You could be to retire next year or never, right? So unfortunately, because we don't have expected returns, we cannot use it for financial planning purposes.
So based on your comments referring to the S&P 500, I'm guessing the stock market of your choice must be the US stock market. Am I correct? And if yes, why?
So ideally, you'd be invested in different stocks from all over the world. That's going to include US, Europe, Japan, emerging markets. And you're going to always have all of these at all times. The weighting of these portfolios or of these funds are going to depend on your personal situation of where you're going to retire. For example, if you want to retire in Japan, you should probably have more stocks in Japan just to prevent some currency risk because the US and they have a lot of international companies as well. So if you look at the top 10 companies within the S&P 500, you look at Microsoft or Apple, for example, most of their money is actually made outside the US. Most of the iPhones are not sold in the US, they're sold outside the US. So these are not American companies. These are international companies which just happen to be headquartered in America. So I think for that reason, it's completely fine to own a lot of American stocks. You're not doing it wrong if you're not American. It's just because America is such, or American companies are so international that now you must have exposure to these American companies.
If you had one tip that everyone should do with their finances, Anthony, what would be the one tip? And don't tell me go consult your financial advisor. A real tip.
That's a good question. In my view, the biggest part is the mindset. So the investment management is relatively easy. You just follow the evidence, right? You follow the experts, and that's going to be okay. Financial planning as well is going to depend from person to person. But the really difficult part, personal finance, trying to identify, who you are, what you want, is that journey of self-discovery, which is very difficult. And specifically the part where you try to graduate from status games, right? You don't need to have the biggest house or the nicest neighborhood, but find a compromise that works for you. Because until you do that, you just won't be able to save enough money to start investing. It's the most difficult part of financial planning. It's the ability to live below your means and invest the difference. And if you let it, your lifestyle is going to increase significantly to the point where you're not able to save. And what I like to tell people, and this applies to most people, at least what I found, is think back on your days as a student when you were at university or when you were in school. You were the poorest you've ever been, but were you also the unhappiest you've ever been? Most time people tell me, no, actually, it was the best time of my life. I was like, there you go. You don't need much money to be happy. You've lived like that before. You don't have to upgrade your life. You can, but you have to understand that there's going to be a trade-off between early retirement and maybe mini retirements where you take 10 years off to enjoy your life, and upgrading your life. It's a trade-off that you have to work with.
And Dimitri and I, we invest for people, but we're not financial advisors. So
Technically,
it's
we
really
are.
good.
Technically, because we
No, I
both passed the test, technically we are, but not really.
but we're not. It's not how to say. It's not our preference. It's not our
No, it's
priority.
not.
We like investing.
Yeah,
Financial advice is much more than
complex, yes.
picking stocks and investing in them. It's a lot more than that. And for a lot of people who require, actually everyone needs financial advice at some point in their
Absolutely.
life.
Absolutely.
It's just some people are not able to bring themselves to that. But eventually, at some point in their life, they will have to go to a financial advisor, and it's better to go earlier than later, because once you are at an age of, let's say 60 or 70, you don't have a retirement. It might be a little bit too late to go to a financial advisor and say, "Hey, how can I save myself here and get some get to retirement?" You wanted to add something, Anthony?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really cool point that you've made. And I think you don't need a financial advisor if you really don't want to, but at least please get a second opinion. Just ask them for a portfolio review, pay them $100 or so. Just say, here's my portfolio. In 10 minutes, could you just tell me what you think? Right. And the guy will be like, $100 for 10 minutes. Yeah, I'll do it. And probably, if you're a competent financial advisor, you look at the portfolio, you can find a lot of issues very quickly. So I did that recently, and I found this person she was German. She was investing in US stocks with a German ETF. And it seems like a good idea, but it's actually inefficient, because if she has spoken to a financial advisor, if she did it correctly, she actually would have bought an ETF that is also investing in US stocks, but that is domiciled in the Republic of Ireland. Because when that happens, the fund benefits from a tax treaty between the US and the Republic of Ireland, where the US dividend withholding tax is reduced from 30% to 15%. So if you consider that the average dividend yield in the US is 1.3%, 1.35, I think, last time I checked, decreasing that tax rate will automatically mean that you make an additional 0.2% per year, guaranteed, just because of that alone, right? And that's something that
it makes that $100 completely
exactly
profitable, an amazing return on that $100 invested.
Absolutely, and that's one tiny thing, right?
Thanks a lot, Anthony. That was really great. It was a great conversation, and again, we'll put all the details in the description of the episode. You're easy to reach on LinkedIn, so people can reach out to you on LinkedIn to book, why not, a first appointment, to get to know you, and then potentially to trust you with the financial planning of their lives. Dimitri, thanks a lot for co-hosting this one with me. Anthony, thanks a lot for being a guest. It was really interesting. I learned really a lot of things in this conversation. So guys, remember to follow Let's Talk, to rate the episode, and you can also ask questions at the end of the episode, and we will make sure to forward the questions to Anthony. He will be very happy to answer them. So thanks a lot, and have a good day.